Nigerians, there are so many things that are happening now that we're not paying sufficient attention to. So many things. And we need to take note of these things so that we can pay attention to them. If not, things will continue to be tough for Nigerians and the middle class will continue to be destroyed, wiped out. So rather than have the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class, what we'll just have is a very small upper class continue to reduce and no middle class, everybody will now be in the lower class. And we don't want that because that will be more suffering for Nigerians. Those who can afford their cars and their houses and their very expensive phones today, if we don't take the right actions, we'll not be able to afford it tomorrow. So today it might appear as though you're living fine. But if we allow these things to continue and we don't pay attention to the things that are happening right now, tomorrow, those who were able to afford these luxurious things will not be able to afford it. Now, what is the thing that I say we need to pay attention to? Ned Nwoko, the senator representing Delta North Senatorial District, has been doing some fantastic work in terms of social welfare in Nigeria. But to my shock, it's not receiving the attention it needs to receive. Activists, human rights activists, um, politicians, religious bodies, religious leaders, educational leaders, leaders of thought, celebrities, they are not talking about it. And then, most importantly, the Nigerian people, we're not talking about this bill that Ned Nwoko has proposed in the Senate, Nigerian Senate. And the bill just passed through first reading. First, it was an open letter to Tinubu, and now it's a bill. And it's strange that from when it was an open letter to Tinubu about 2 or 3 months ago, and now that it is going through the National Assembly and it has gone through the first reading, Nigerians are not paying attention to it. The whole idea of the bill is good, and I'll read some of them to you. It says that it's to establish the National Social Security Agency to repeal the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. One. Two, it aims to create a new agency under the office of the president. Three, it seeks to provide social security for all vulnerable Nigerians or vulnerable citizens of Nigeria. Then four, it seeks to institutionalize welfare to such an extent that there is guaranteed provision of welfare stipulated so far as a person living within Nigeria is a citizen and that person is vulnerable, having met certain criteria. We should support this bill. This is what we should be talking about. This is what we should be talking about. One very beautiful effect of this bill will be that it will remove palliative from our economy. Because right now, what we have is palliative welfare. Palliative welfare. And because we have palliative welfare and because human beings are designed to be competitive, to stay alive, what you have is there's now corruption, and the palliatives only gets to people that are friends and cronies of the people in charge of them, just because, of course, it cannot go round. And because of that, sometimes even the palliatives do not even get to the people. And because of that, people find themselves selling their souls to get these palliatives. And that means that there'll be human rights violation. And then what do you now get? Because there's massive human rights violation, you now have palliative justice, where you have activists fighting for certain people, 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 100,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000, palliative justice. So if we're going to be effective all of these human rights activists out there, very dark man, ordinary Ahmed Issa Brekete family, and the likes, if we're going to get effective justice and deal with human rights issues, violations at the root, then we must pay attention to what Ned Nwoko is saying. This is the way to go about it. When people have their food problem solved for them, then they will be able to understand what their rights is. Right now, many Nigerians do not understand what their rights are. And if you don't understand what your rights are, how can you fight for it? How can you demand for the enforcement of your rights? You can't. So, for all of us out there who are trying to bring justice, get Nigeria to work for everybody, this bill by Ned Nwoko is what we should be supporting. I have some issues with the bill though, and Ned Nwoko, I need you to pay attention to this. It doesn't affect the fact that your bill has gone through the first reading. It doesn't affect that fact at all. In fact, your bill can be passed. It's a step in the right direction, just like the Students' Loan Act was done. In 2023, it was hurriedly passed, and then in 2024, it was repealed and replaced with a 2024 Act. So that your bill, Ned Nwoko, that seeks to create or establish a national social security agency, has passed the first reading. Even though I have these concerns about it, it should not stop it from going to the second or third or even being passed. But if the changes I'm going to suggest now can be made, it will be in your interest to make them. Because I am particularly excited at the spirit of this bill that you have proposed. So one of the issues I have with it is this. It says the NSSA, which is the National Social Security Agency bill, aims to create a new agency under the office of the president. No. For this agency to work effectively, it cannot be put under the office of the president. It cannot. Once you put it under the office of the president, you have politicized it. It will now be that the president will now appoint people to head that agency as a reward for supporting him. In fact, this agency should not have any affiliation with the presidency at all. It should be a self-governing mechanism, self-governing agency. That's what it should be. And so structures must be put in place within the bill itself to ensure independence of this agency. You made mention of something in your interviews, and you said that the bill, once it becomes an act, will ensure that every vulnerable Nigerian is able to get social welfare support without having to know anybody. The need for divine connection, who you know, destiny helper, all those will now be a thing of the past if this bill is passed. Wonderful spirit, wonderful motive, and wonderful objective. Yes, that should be it. We should have a welfare system in Nigeria where Nigerians do not need to know anybody before they get social welfare support. This is why it cannot be under the office of the president, because if it's under the office of the president, then you have just politicized it and it will be dead on arrival. These politicians know how to manipulate these laws to suit themselves, to suit their pockets. So the law must be created in such a way that it is shielded from the influence of the president. And the second issue I have with it is that you say it seeks to replace the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. It doesn't have to. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs can be there to do its interventions, but the bulk of the work is done. In fact, it can provide oversight functions, but not administrative implementation function over the committee or the agency that, in fact, we don't need to create an agency. A committee is enough. And the funds for this social security cannot be domiciled in a special account over which this agency has control. Like the NEL fund, where you have the student loan administration body having control over the fund. No, the fund will be domiciled at the CBN. The agency or the committee responsible for administering social welfare support, that agency is only administrative. They have no access to cash. They only will come up with modalities, website for capturing people into a database, provide such database to the CBN for the CBN to do direct cash transfers into the accounts of people, direct from CBN upon the provision of the database by this committee or the agency you're talking about. The agency should not be in control of the cash. No, we should copy what Indians did. They did the transfer directly from the central bank into people's account. The money cannot be put under the control of this agency, and then you put the agency under the control of the president. That way you have killed it. It will not be different from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs as we have it today. They will just corner the money and siphon it into private pockets. So your law must provide for structures that insulate it from, first, the office of the president, and secondly, from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, not necessarily repealing or replacing it. And then it must also be such that even the committee that controls or that is responsible for this social welfare should not have access to the fund. It should create a fund that will be domiciled in the CBN, and the committee or the agency you're talking about should only be involved in gathering and providing the structure for gathering the the information, the biodata of vulnerable Nigerians, capturing it. And once it is captured and verified through things like BVN and NIN, then that information is sent to CBN, and CBN will now do direct cash transfers to the people. And the way this can be done, which is something that you have not captured, is that this cash should not be cash that is given to people for them to spend anyhow. It must be tied to agricultural food production. This is how I have structured it in my own draft, and I would like you to have this draft. It's in the description of this video. I will love you to have this draft. It is tied to agricultural production, and the way I have designed it is that the social welfare law should create a social welfare fund, and that will mean that it will create a website through which people can enter their details. Those who are not able to read and write can get those who are able to read and write to register them. And then we can have agents from across the different government agencies to assist those who are not able to read and write or have access to internet to enter their data into the website. So the website will capture the biodata of vulnerable Nigerians. And once that is done, using their national identity number and their BVN, we are able to identify their income level. So we can say, we can have different income level. If your income level is below 1,500,000 naira a year, then you have this. If your income level is zero, then you have this. So we can have such categorization. And once they register on the website, we use their BVN and NIN to identify that. Then they will be given a welfare card. Every Nigerian who seeks social benefits will have a welfare card. And the essence of this welfare card is that this is the welfare card that will be a sort of ATM, a special ATM, where money sent to that ATM card, the welfare card, can only be spent to purchase food at farmers market, at grocery stores, at um, markets. Only be spent to purchase food item. It can be designed. It's very easy. It's just it. Once we have a decision to do that, it's easy to do actually. So once that is done, The people, the CBN will send the money directly. Remember, the committee or the agency does not have access to the cash, to the funds, the way the NEL fund does. No, it is the CBN that will push the money directly to people. And it doesn't matter how many Nigerians have applied, everybody must get. It doesn't matter who those that applied know in government, everybody must get. This is how to institutionalize our social welfare. Once we're able to do this, then we have a country that works for everybody. It's a starting point. Everything will correct itself from there. So, Ned Nwoko, this is what we should do. These are the changes you must make to your social welfare, National Social Security Agency's bill. You must remove it from under the office of the president. The president should not have any control at all, any input in appointing who leads it. It shouldn't. I have suggested ways to make it self-governing. It must not necessarily replace the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. It must not. It can be an agency that is oversighted by both the CBN and the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Then it must be structured in such a way that it doesn't increase inflation. And that is only possible if we ensure that people who apply get a welfare card, which is a special ATM, into which the CBN will pay the money into directly. And that special welfare card can only be spent on buying food. So invariably, this is set up to encourage and boost agricultural production in Nigeria, because once these people buy food, they are given an opportunity to enter into agricultural production through incentives, because effectively the money will be going into supporting agricultural hub. This is where my suggestions differ from yours and makes it even superior to yours. You should accept that it is superior to yours, because at the end of the day, what you seek is what I seek. And it's beautiful what you seek. And that's why I'm throwing my weight behind it. But it needs some improvement. I will kindly advise that you take these improvements and put them into your bill so that Nigerians will be happy. Wonderful. Your heart is in a good place for making these suggestions. And then you talked about the Foreign Currency and Local Currency Act. I don't know what you call that one, but we'll look into it. You also have your heart in the right place. I wish Nigerians would pay attention to these things. Nigerians were not paying attention to it. We are distracted by less important things. This is it. This is the only thing that all of us should be talking about. If this law is enacted, insecurity will be reduced. Insecurity will be reduced. Poverty will be reduced. Job creation will be increased if this law is passed. This is it. The human rights violation that we human rights activists are fighting for, are fighting against rather. Human rights violation will reduce if this bill is passed. So this is very important. This is more important than football. It's more important than movies. It's more important than music. But unfortunately, it's not getting even 1/10 of the attention that football, Arsenal, Man U is getting. It's not getting 1/10 of the action that music celebrities are getting. It's not getting 1/10 of the action that movie watchers are getting. It's not. And this is a problem. All of us must pay attention to it. Religious leaders must talk about this bill. Celebrities must talk about this bill. Political leaders, traditional leaders must talk about this bill. This is it. This is the whole essence of government. Yet it's not receiving the attention it deserves. We must change. We must change.